All right, welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Now, before we get started tonight, Molly and I want to take a moment to thank the good folks down in Connecticut with the Smokey Joe Wood chapter of SABR. They hosted an event yesterday at Duncan Park in Hartford, Connecticut, a Reading Fightin' Phil's Hartford Yard Goats game where we got to hang out with some of the folks from Connecticut yesterday. Once again, it's always a good time in Dunkin' Donuts Park, as well as getting together with some of our friends and fellow SABR fans. So we want to thank them for hosting us. Yard Goats won the game. I got to hear a little brass bonanza from my days with the Hartford Whalers. I thought that was great too. So we really appreciated the hospitality. So thank you very much. SABR's historical database of Major League Baseball team employees has recently been updated to include entries from the 2024 season and to add new information for more than 52,000 people employed by Major League teams over the past 150 years. The SABR MLB Team Employee Database, published through SABR's Business of Baseball Committee, offers a unique lens into Major League front and back offices from team owners to ticket sales. Visit the SABR Research Resources page to access the database and learn more. Next source of information tonight is from RetroSheet. RetroSheet has just announced their summer 2025 updates, which include updated data for the 2000 to 2019 seasons, event files for the 1911 and 1913 seasons, and so much more, including data on the 1936 Negro League season, thanks in part to esteemed SABR member and top-notch researcher, Alan Cohen, who's with us this evening. For more information on RetroSheet's updates, go to sabr.org and click latest news, and that headline will come up. All right, here we go. On to our feature presentation. Once running the bases counter-clockwise became the norm in baseball, long before the Civil War, the days of the left-handed throwing middle infielder seemed numbered. The need to pivot before sending the ball leftward made lefties a liability in the eyes of players and pundits alike. Yet during the 1860s, some top-flight amateur clubs defied convention and embraced LHMIs. This presentation will identify 12 known Major League double-play combinations that were left-handed, all but one of which was limited to the 19th century. Detail how those pairings came to be and touch on how they fared. Also shared will be contemporary perspective on the use of LHMIs, trending data on LHMI use in each major league, and a theory as to why American Association Baltimore Orioles relied on LHMIs far more than their peers. SABR member Larry DeFillipo is a retired aerospace engineer who worked on numerous Earth orbiting and interplanetary spacecraft projects. Briefly, a subpar left-hander at Stony Brook University, he has long been enamored with both baseball and American history. He has twice presented at the Frederick Ivor Campbell 19th Century Baseball Conference and has articles published in SABR's Baseball Research Journal, the National Pastime, and so much more. He's authored more than a dozen ballplayer and stadium biographies for SABR's Biography Project and dozens of game stories for the Games Project, with an emphasis on uncovering firsts and otherwise undocumented records. Larry lives with his wife Kelly in Kennewick, Washington, near their two young grandchildren, and he is here tonight to give his 2025 Ivor presentation. Larry DeFillipo, welcome to Northern New England, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. Glad to be here. I brought my Fiji water bottle so that I'm on theme, on brand for the 2 weeks, was it, of summer?
It's only two.
Two weeks. Awesome. All right. So let's go to my presentation and let's see. Where do I need to move here? Let's share. All right. Can everybody see can you see my charts there, Bruce?
I can see your presentation. It looks great.
Awesome. Okay, so this is a presentation I gave in April at Cooperstown at the Fred, and I've continued doing work in this arena, and so it's got some updates, some things people haven't seen before. So I'll start by saying I've always been interested in why I never ran across left-handed infielders, dating back to when I was a left-handed second baseman in Little League. And of course, I didn't do it for very long because I probably was pretty bad at it, but it's something that always intrigued me. So, of course, as Bruce explained, middle infield has been the domain of right-handers for a very, very long time, since essentially the beginning of the sport. And one notable example of the impact of the bias against left-handers is Luke Appling. While he's in high school in North Carolina, was a lefty like his dad was, and he switched to throwing right-handed so that he could play the position that he loved, shortstop. And then, in fact, I ran across an example just a few days ago. Pablo Sandoval, as a little leaguer in Venezuela in the 1990s, I read, switched from being a lefty to being a righty so that he could catch and play shortstop. So apparently he must have been pretty good as a shortstop, but to make it all the way to the major leagues. So, so the origin of running the bases counterclockwise goes back to the earliest uncovered set of rules for the sport. David Block, in his book, Baseball Before We Knew It, uncovered a German reference from 1796 that defined here in German, and I didn't use my high school German because I'm sure it would be awful. Translated on the right is the details of proceeding from alpha to beta and then the different pegs that corresponded to the bases. So running counterclockwise dates back as far as the sport has been documented. Now, when the first set of the Knickerbocker rules came that established the framework for much of the modern game, they did not identify the direction in which the bases were to be run. But when the National Association of Baseball Players came up with a much more expansive set of rules in 1857, Rule 4, which was drafted by a member of the Knickerbockers, Doc Adams, expressly defined third base shall be on the left-hand side of the striker, i.e. Running the bases counterclockwise. So the definition of that orientation to run the bases didn't preclude left-handers from fielding at any position, but it certainly engendered a perspective from Henry Chadwick, who shared his opinions, of course, on how the sport ought to be played. So in the 1860s, when he's comparing two top-flight amateur second basemen, Fred Crane and Al Reach, he reports in an article in the Clipper that he prefers Crane simply because he's right-handed, and that Al's left-handedness works against him in the position he occupied, which at the time was, and for most of his career, was second base. And then this same perspective you see a handful of years later when Chadwick defines the perspective that really has carried forward for the century and a half since, which is left-handed players are out of position in the infield anywhere but first base. But despite that perspective, teams in the amateur era and the dawn of the professional era did not hew to that line. And in fact, there are a number of starting left-handed second basemen on prominent teams. The 1860s, Reach, a member of the Eckfords that were champions in 1862 and 63. And then, of course, with the Athletics of Philadelphia. Bob Addy, for several years, was left-handed second baseman with the Rockford Forest Cities. And he had 4 hits in the game in which 16-year-old Al Spalding defeated the Washington Nationals. And then Lip Pike was also a regular second baseman for a number of teams, Athletics and Mutuals, Atlantics. and was playing in the game in 1870, in which the Atlantics ended the Cincinnati Red Stockings streak of 81 games without a loss. But on the shortstop side, what you find, we do find left-handed shortstops, they tended to be substitute players. And perhaps because of the greater frequency that shortstops need to make a throw to first base, throw to their left, Fergie Malone was a regular shortstop as a lefty for the Athletics in 1862, but then he transitioned to first base and catcher, and was occasionally a substitute shortstop for Quaker City in '67. John McMullen was a pitcher, played shortstop in a game I found that the Athletics played against the Red Stockings. And Ed Pinkham, member of the Eckfords, outfielder pitcher, played shortstop just on occasion. So in trying to understand the prevalence of left-handed middle infielders, I tallied up by decade across all the major leagues, and for this chart, lumping the National Association as a major league. And you see in the 1870s, there are 200 plus games by both second baseman and shortstop. And I tally them as appearances, not trying to distinguish whether a team used multiple of the left-handers in the same game. And that corresponded to about 14%. So 1 in 7 games in the 1870s included a left-hander in the middle infield. As you go into the 1880s, it's explosive growth in the number of games because the number of leagues. You have more than 4 times as many games across those leagues. And you have 1,100 plus appearances by left-handed second basemen, 700 plus by shortstops, but their prevalence is actually less than in the 1870s, but it's still 1 in 8 or so second basemen and 1 in 12 or so shortstops. When you get to the 1890s, now the American Association has disappeared after '91, and the National League reigns. The number of appearances drops and the prevalence drops, where you just have 2 to 3% of games have a lefty in them. And then you get to the 1900s, you're down to in the 30s and a handful of shortstop appearances, and you're less than 0.1%. You've got 1 in 1,000 games. And as you go in subsequent decades, the numbers get even smaller. Looking across franchises, I wanted to understand, and this came about from a game story I did on John McGraw's debut. The Baltimore Orioles sort of pop out as using lefties in the middle infield more than their peers, the Philadelphia Phillies being second most in the Baltimore franchise. And so, using them more than 600 times, digging a little deeper, that happened while Billy Barney was the manager of the team in the 1880s and into 1891. He had a left-handed starting shortstop, Jimmy Macular, from 84 to 86, a left-handed regular second baseman, Bill Greenwood, in 87 and 88. And he started 1891 with George Van Halteren, who came over from the Players League. Normally a pitcher outfielder. He put him at shortstop for 59 games, but he was a terrible shortstop. It was so bad that then Barney went recruiting, and he uncovered playing in Iowa, an 18-year-old from Truxton, New York, named John McGraw. And he brought McGraw on to be his shortstop. Of course, Ned Hanlon converted McGraw into a third baseman, but McGraw got his start as replacing a left-handed middle infielder. So why, I wanted to try to understand why might Barney have been the one manager and well, the one franchise that used multiple left-handers in the middle infield. And there are connections he had with Pike and Reach. Pike was managing the 1874 Hartford team, the Dark Blues, and Barney was not really a substitute. I think they had a shared catching arrangement. And then, of course, Reach hired Barney for the first version of the Philadelphia Phillies when they were in the League Alliance before they joined the National League. Now, I've not run across anything from Barney or Reach yet. Excuse me, Barney or Pike talking about using lefties in the middle infield. But Reach was a lifelong believer that left-handers were particularly well suited for the infield. And here's one quote I grabbed from him many years later, in 1890s. And he talks about contention that southpaw is in the best natural position to throw to first after making a stop. So he's countering Chadwick's perspective. And of course, Reach is trying to sell gloves and sporting goods. So it's hard to say whether this was to try to sell infield gloves to lefties or what, but there are multiple occasions where he speaks on behalf of using left-handers. So one thing I've seen in various sources or claims as to teams use left-handed middle infielders only if they were second division clubs and poor quality, lacked talent. So I sort of mapped out all the teams that use left-handed second baseman or shortstop for 10 games or more, or had 10 or more appearances across the leagues, nicely color-coded there. And so the team with the best record, of course, was in 1871, Athletics of Philadelphia, the National Association's first pennant winner, reaches their second baseman. There's 48 teams represented here. Only 16 of them wound up with a winning percentage above 500. The median is 435, which is like a 70 win team, certainly not a first division club. And what also I marked the 6 clubs that Billy Barney had that had left-handed middle infielders who played more than 10 games. And he had some of the better clubs, and they fell on both sides of the line. So all that is prelude to what I was searching for all along, which is left-handed double play combinations. Were there any? And I presumed at the start that there were, but I couldn't really find them looking at different sources, online databases, Baseball Reference, Baseball Almanac, a bunch of different places. And so I dug it out myself, and I guess the Elias Sports Bureau could have done this probably more quickly, but I did stat-head queries to find lefties who played games at second base or shortstop. And then I went through the seasons for those individuals where they played left-handed in middle infield positions. Then I looked for teams that had a left-hander who had appeared in at least one game at second and a different one who appeared in game at short. And then I went through and created game logs for each of those teams for their entire season. None of these have retro sheet game logs, if you will, until, of course, you get to the 1910s. And then from the game log, I found double play combinations of left-handed second baseman and left-handed shortstop. And this is what I found. I found 12 teams, and they're listed on the right, all between 1874 and 1902. And the total number of games they played was 63. So 19 National Association games, you can see on the graphic on the left. The National League had 12, 16, and 27 American Association games and 1 American League game. The query I did on the last page, I went all the way to 2024. So knowing that you had things like Lou Gehrig playing shortstop, you had, Frank Chance or Al Chance playing second base, I believe. So I went all the way to the current day, and 1902 was the last instance in the major leagues. There's one possible exception. The 1942 Jacksonville Redcaps had one player play a game at second as lefty and one play a game at short as lefty. But I haven't found enough box scores or game summaries to definitively say they did not have a left-handed double play combination. So that's one caveat. Now, what you also see, I guess I have to look here, all the pictures are covering my data. These teams had generally poor records, as the graphic I showed you earlier. Most of them below 500 teams. And if you look on the far right, the record in games in which they use left-handed double play combinations were poor for certainly the teams that use them the most often. Next slide, I haven't read. The Hartford club I mentioned earlier and the 1889 Columbus American Association team. Both were the most frequent users of lefties in their middle infield, but neither did more than 20 games. And they both had awful records in those games. And in aggregate, teams won less than 1 out of every 3 games that used left-handed middle infielders. So when in my flow chart back there, I had an asterisk. And it's a big one. The throwing arm for a lot of 19th century ball players is not known. Just looking at teams that had a known left-handed second baseman or shortstop, I found 118 middle infielders who had unknown throwing arms. So there's surely even more. So presumably, even if it just matches the general population percent of people that are lefties, which is, I think, historically 10%, some of those were surely lefties, and some of those were potentially part of double play, lefty double play combinations. And I pulled out one example, sort of notorious John Radcliffe, thrown off the Philadelphia Whites in the 1870s for trying to fix a game, and then brought on board the next year by the Philadelphia Centennials. His throwing arm is unknown, but he played without reach and Lip Pike. So if he was a lefty, it would have constituted a few more double play combinations. So the 12 I've identified is, as of this point in time, if databases get more robust with these 19th century players on throwing arm, my list would be longer. So and now I'm going to go into each of the teams and talk a little about how their double play combos came to be, because they weren't by design. First, Hartford, 19 games together, Addy and Lip Pike. So Addy is the club's regular second baseman. Shortstop Tom Barlow, you might recognize the name, and I'll go into it a little more. He leaves the game sick, and Pike, the next day, he takes second and bumps Addy over to short. 6 weeks later, Barlow's hospital. He comes back to the play the next championship season game for Hartford. Then 6 weeks later, he's hospitalized. Pike puts himself at short, moves Addy back to his regular position second. They play the rest of the season there together. On the bottom, I have cumulative stats for these players. And both Addy and Pike played above league average. I have normalized or relative fielding percentage, comparing them to others in their same position. And they also drew some praise. There's a quote from the Brooklyn Union talking about them playing sharply in their positions. And this is a log of the games. I'm not going to go through that, but that's just my game logs. So Barlow was featured in inning 1 of Ken Burns' baseball documentary in a vignette called I Was a Catcher. And in that, I think it might be Garrison Keillor, I'm not sure, or maybe Stephen King, read a letter that Barlow had written to the Boston Times years later, claiming that on an exact date of August 10th, 1874, he suffered a catching injury and the doctor administered morphine to him. And that caused him to develop a drug addiction that ultimately ruined his career and presumably took him at a young age. So on the day, August 10th, the day he got sick, came out, he played shortstop, and he didn't catch at all for Hartford in 1874. So whatever the reason he came out, whether it was addiction related or something completely unrelated, his absence led to what appears to be the first left-handed double play combination in professional baseball history. So now let's talk about the Columbus team, 1889 Columbus Babies. So the local press called them Babies because they were new to the American Association. I think we also call them Solons and Buckeyes. I've seen a bunch of different names for them. So they play 17 games together. So Bill Greenwood is the club's regular left-handed second baseman, 118 of the 140 games. They have a left-handed third baseman, Lefty Marr, who when the club's regular righty shortstop, Henry Easterday, his father passes away, he needs to leave and take care of family business. So Marr moves from third to shortstop, and then Spud Johnson, I forget where he was in the outfield, I guess, gets moved to third base. And so for 3 games against St. Louis Browns, we have the only known major league lineup with lefties at second, short, and third. So the group does reasonably well in their first game, but then I believe it's the second game, Marr does terribly, makes 5 errors in a game in Louisville, and the Louisville press makes a rather crude cartoon of him. It says Marr at short, and it has him being egregiously bow-legged. And then I mark on the bottom here in red, Greenwood ultimately winds up playing more games at second base than any other lefty, 538. So those are the 2 teams that used lefties the most. So then teams that used them just briefly. Cincinnati Reds, for 2 games, used Jimmy Hallinan at second, who was their regular second baseman, and Lip Pike, who was their center fielder, moves in and plays shortstop after the club's shortstop, Jack Manning, who was the worst fielder in the league at shortstop, makes a couple of errors. Next day, Pike makes 4 errors. 2 days later, he gives up his role as being a captain. The team was doing poorly, 3-10 record. Nonetheless, the Cincinnati Enquirer felt he played well in his first game with Hallinan. Next team, 1879, the Syracuse Stars. Macular, I mentioned earlier, is the Orioles shortstop. Is a rookie here with Cincinnati, and he's their shortstop for most of their games early in the year. The club's second baseman, Jack Farrell, gets sick. They install another rookie, Hick Carpenter, a lefty, at second. He does okay the first game. The next day, he is utterly at sea, commits 4 errors, never plays second base again. But he does go on to become a regular third baseman for Cincinnati, as it turns out. And he plays more games for lefty at third than anyone else, 1,059. And Macular on the right, he plays more games at shortstop than any other lefty, 325. So then the Philadelphia Phillies, their first year as National League members, they have 8 games where Bill Harbridge and Bill McClellan play together. McClellan's the club's regular shortstop. Harbridge is substitute shortstop, also plays left field. The manager is Bob Death the Flying Things Ferguson. He injures a finger, puts Harbridge in for him, and plays a handful of games and then another handful in June. And the Philadelphia Times thought highly of both Harbridge and McClellan's performance. So now we have the Brooklyn Grays, maybe, not sure what name we are calling them lately, but Brooklyn Club of the American Association. So this is the first season of the team that becomes the Dodgers. The first game of the Dodger franchise, Bill Greenwood is their second baseman. The day before, literally the day before the game, they released their shortstop, Denny Mack, who was sore-armed. And so they wrangled John Cassidy from the outfield to play shortstop. He commits a pair of errors. The Washington Nationals run away with the game. The next day, the club's catcher winds up at shortstop. He is not acceptable. And then for the third game, Billy Gear, who was a famed future check forger, and there was a fabulous presentation at Cooperstown on that, on his many times spent incarcerated. So he jumps from the Keystones and the Union Association as a shortstop for the entire rest of the season for Brooklyn. 1884 Orioles, Macular is their shortstop all but one game. The left-handed catcher, Sam Trott, fills in for weak-hitting second baseman for one game and then a couple more. Praise from the Baltimore Sun. The next year's similar situation. Macular's their everyday shortstop. Lefty Trott fills in for Manning, who was shifted to third because of a third baseman is sick. Rain shortened game. Trott commits 2 errors, and then Manning is back in his position. 1886 Brooklyn team. Game played in Ridgewood Park in Queens, which Brooklyn used to get around the blue laws. Played Sundays there. McClellan's their second baseman. They use a backup catcher, Dave Oldfield. He's unable to hold the pitches, the swift offerings of Henry Porter. Oldfield gets moved from catcher to shortstop in the middle of the game, and he finishes the game there. Never plays another game in the middle infield. And then I have 3 more teams left. The 1892 Chicago Colts. So here you have the club's shortstop, Bill Dallin, is away in Milwaukee defending himself from a lawsuit for breach of contract for signing a contract and taking $500 of advance money from Milwaukee Brewers. Well, the Western League goes out of business. Dallin winds up with Chicago, who doesn't give the money back. Anyway, Pat Anson moves his lefty left fielder, Jimmy Ryan, to shortstop, and then does well enough that the next day Anson moves his lefty right fielder, George Decker, to replace a lousy hitting Jim Connor. And Decker stays there for the next 15 games, and the press thinks highly of him. The following year, Decker does so well, he's the team's regular shortstop starting the season. Oh, excuse me, regular second baseman. Dallin takes a ball in his left eye during warmups of a game. Ryan comes in, backs him up for that one game. Decker commits an error, but the St. Louis Post-Dispatch thought his work was particularly rank, although statistics-wise, it doesn't show up in the game summary. Maybe just a poor winner there in the St. Louis press. And then, excuse me, and the last team. So this one is kind of a vaudeville game. So the last day of the season, the Browns and the White Sox, this is in 1902, play a doubleheader. The Browns have already clinched second place behind the Philadelphia A's. So Jimmy McAleer, the manager, decides to completely scramble the lineup. So takes right fielder Charlie Hemphill, who's a lefty, puts him at second. Takes future Hall of Famer Jesse Burkett, left fielder, puts him at short. Clark Griffith of the Chicago, the White Sox, does something similar. He puts his catcher to pitch, Sam Mertz, and has Frank Isbell catch. And then they switch every inning. So basically a farce. A few innings into the game, Burkett goes out to pitch. The press thinks highly of Hemphill's performance, but generally it was just, like I said, a diamond burlesque. And the next day, St. Louis Republic has a series of cartoons, one of which shows Burkett turning a 6-6-3 double play. It shows a crude left hand there. And then on the right, you see the crazy lineup, which doesn't even show all of the position changes. So now I have a few slides on defensive metrics for these left-handed middle infielders. So twin killing. So I became fascinated once I found some left-handed middle infield combinations. How many double plays did they turn? So I found 4 that involved the lefty second baseman, but not the shortstop. 2 that involved the lefty second baseman, not shortstop. 2 that involved the lefty shortstop, but not second baseman. And I found 6 where both middle infielders were involved. A 4-6-3 double play turned by Columbus. 4 6-4-3s also turned by Columbus, and 1 4-3-6. One caveat is the Hartford team of 1874. There's very rarely were double plays reported in box scores that year. So there may have been more, and they're each credited with a handful of double plays, but I did not find any mention of it in the text or box scores for them. And so that double play on the bottom, that trotted macular turn, the Baltimore Sun was particularly impressed with having made what they call the lightning double play. Now on the left, I have a rather renowned graphic from Harper's Weekly from opening day of the 1886 season, where Boston is batting and the New York Giants are in the field. And this purported to show a double play where in the middle there should be Joe Gerhard, second baseman, and John Montgomery Ward is sort of sticking on the right. That's lovely lithograph, but reading every box score and every description of the game, it's clear there were no double plays turned in that game. So I used artistic license as well and used that image as the backdrop for all of my slides, even though neither Gerhard nor Ward are lefties. So looking at, and this is new, wasn't in what I presented in Cooperstown, compare the frequency of double plays turned to the aggregate of across all teams. And so the graph there is showing the average double plays per chance for middle infielders, second and shortstop, from 1876 through the 1902, and the aggregate for all left-hand double play combinations from 1876 to 1902, which is 500 some chances, a dozen double plays, is about 0.0236. So if that big difference is statistically significant, maybe not. Probably has as much to do with novelty of playing together as being left-handed. Would take a lot more analysis to tease that out, but I just thought this was interesting to try to see the relative frequency. And then looking at the fielding percentages of middle infielders. So this is the last of the data I have. I thought it'd be interesting to see how they did compare to their peers. And so these are the players who played in left-handed middle infielders, 10 games or more, normalized to league average for that year. And you see in the sort of northwest quadrant a number of National Association names: Reach and Addy. Redmond was a St. Louis Red Stocking catcher. And in the in the National Association years, 1871 to 75, almost half of the players there are above 1.00. As you move to the sort of the next era, the 1876, started the National League, to the end of the American Association, 1891, you just see a few names: Macular, Greenwood, Sutcliffe. And Greenwood actually one year was the league leader in fielding percentage. There's only 3 out of 30 some. So the most left-handed middle infielders were played below the league average. And then you look to 1891 and beyond, every one of the players who played at least 10 games was below replacement value, if you will, or below 1.0 normalized fielding percentage. And the last player there is Willie Keeler, who played a dozen games for the Highlanders at second base. So Keeler was no fan of lefties. Apparently wasn't thrilled about having to play that position. So he's interviewed several years earlier. He was asked about lefties playing second, short, or third. And he said, no, they cannot in the big league be a success in those positions. So here we have a mirroring of Chadwick's perspective and really the perspective that still holds sway today. And that is it for my charts. I haven't. So what do I need to do next? Turn the mic back on.
So one of the things that I was saying to matter of fact, my wife in the chat was, this is super high level and fantastic research and data. Really, really good stuff. I'm 19th century baseball is not in my wheelhouse. I'm a 60s, 70s, 80s guy, so I am the complete antithesis of anything that is presented at the IBOR, because the IBOR is such an amazing conference. But what I always take away from these presentations on 19th century baseball is some of the anomalies or interesting nicknames. You know, it struck me that one catcher said, due to a catching injury, I now have a morphine addiction, or and things like, it's just a fascinating look into not only baseball but into life in general in that time frame. Very interesting stuff here. If you go ahead, Larry, I'm sorry.
I certainly found, running across the Barlow story, it is fascinating how, just like any other industry, baseball would reflect the times, and financial or marital situations, run across things that are reflective of the era in which these happened.
Dan Mason in the chat, data from the 1880s is elite level sabering, and that put it better than I just did. Good work, Mason. That was very good. That was excellent. Hey, listen, if you guys have a question, comment, or whatever for our presenter, Larry DeFillipo, tonight, go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the reactions button. Once you do that, hit raise hand. Raise your hand. We'll get you in line to ask questions of Larry tonight. And Ryan McClanahan, he knows the score. What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. Thank you. A lot of research seems to have gone into this, Larry. So thank you so much. And I have a quick question. You mentioned Bill Dolan and a lawsuit. Do you think that could be one of the reasons why he's not in the Hall of Fame right now?
Oh, I don't know enough about Dolan's career, but I think this was a minor issue with all the contract jumping that was going on, and the league was, the Western League had gone under at that point before it resuscitated a few years later. So I would doubt it personally, but I'm no expert in Dolan's career.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Once again, that is elite level sabering there, because I'm going to have to go and research Dolan at the Bio Project, because honestly, these are the things that I take away every week when we run these meetings, because I had never, ever heard that name. Dixie is now plotting my punishment for this, because I know that it's a name that I've never heard, and I just learned so much. This is such good stuff. Roger Catherine in the chat, because his microphone is broken tonight, the poor guy. Do you have left-handed starting players from each position? That's a direct quote. Larry?
I'm not sure I understand what the question is, whether they started the games or...
Roger, could you clarify your question a little bit more in the chat so we could get it answered correctly for you?
I did also, by the way, although it's not in this presentation, I also tabulated third baseman who played left as lefties. So I have more data to mine, which I've left for a future.
Okay, so I think I know one, and that was Don Mattingly, but that was obviously a 20th century guy. Didn't Mattingly play third base for a couple of games?
I believe so.
Did I get one right? Holy cow. Oh my
yes,
gosh.
he did.
We might crash into the sun tonight, folks. Roger clarified his question by asking best left-handed throwers at each position.
By fielding percentage or something like that. Well, the slides there, it looked like Reach had was the top for his era, so it goes by era. Greenwood was clearly maintained a level of eliteness, if you will, for several years. So I would give Reach and Greenwood the rise for a left-handed second baseman. Shortstop, it's not quite so obvious.
Some interesting stuff. Alec Stace in the chat. One recent third base lefty is a manager in the NL Central, and I am thinking that he is talking about Tito Francona. Am I right? I thought Tito was a lefty. Terry, of course. Known as Tito up here in New England. I think he was a lefty, wasn't he? If I recall correctly, he writes left-handed.
Played third in one game in the 80s.
So I was right.
Yeah.
Oh boy, I got two. Oh, it could be all over here, folks. I'll tell you. Cincinnati Reds have been starting a left-handed center fielder in Friedel. That's that. Yep. The other position that doesn't get too many people play it left-handed, of course, is catcher. My wife in the chat, go buy a lotto ticket. She just wants me to buy a lotto ticket and win because she doesn't want to work, but that's another story altogether.
Yeah, so I looked up my table of third basemen. So I'll rattle off some names. Gerardo Parra, Anthony Rizzo, Mario Valdez, Mattingly, Francona, Mike Squires played 13 games for the 84 White Sox.
Wow.
White Sox, 13 games. Henry Merchant, Johnny Scott, Rogelio Linares. We're going back to the 40s. So, there was a spate of them here.
Wow.
The last 3-4 decades. Spate meaning, i.e., 10.
Yep. And apparently Squires had a 4-game error, according to Alex Stays. I would bet the farm that he's right on that. I seem to recall that stat somewhere along the line and whatnot. If there are no further questions, and I'm seeing no further hands raised up, I just want to mention that I was remiss in our introduction tonight in forgetting to mention my visit with Phil Bergen last week. Phil is a longtime SABR member who donated a large number of books to the Art Springsteen Memorial Library, and we are very, very thankful to him for helping us keep Art's memory and project alive. We, in getting these books and adding them to our collection, we now have a number of back issues of the Baseball Research Journal that are available for members who need them. If you have a need for any of them and would like to inquire, please drop me an email and I'll be happy to chat with you. Dan Mason in the chat, Don Mattingly, third base video for the win. There is a video of that out there on YouTube that you can see. Dan found that quick, so at some point you can grab that. Join us Monday, August 11th at 7 p.m. when we host friend of our chapter and president of the New York Giants Preservation Society, Gary Mintz, who will be giving his presentation, Remembering Willie 1 Year Later. Me, Willie, and the memory of Willie. The sign-up link is available in the chapter meeting booklet and in the SABR events calendar. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our weekly uploads. And if you are not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research committees, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world, just like Larry DeFillipo. For more information, go to saber.org today. Larry DeFillipo, you are fantastic. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We really appreciate you doing this for us. Thank you very much. Let's get everybody out of here. Let's go watch some baseball. What do you say? Huh? All right.
Let's go Mets.
There you go. There you go. Go Orioles, please. Go Orioles, please. All right. We'll see everybody next week on Monday. Have a good night, folks.
Good night.